This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service.
Manx Radio.
Loving Kindness is the title of our first piece of music today. It's also a good theme tune for today's programme, as both my guests are, in different ways, deeply concerned with the well-being of others. And we'll meet Jen Casson and Rev'd Andrew de Smet after this.
My wisdom flows from the highest source. I salute that source in you. Let us work together for unity and love. Unity and love. I offer you peace. I offer you love. I offer you friendship. I see your beauty. I hear your need. I feel your feelings. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. May you be happy. May you be happy. May you be happy.
Loving Kindness, composed by Howard Goodall and sung by Aled Jones, and there'll be more music from Aled later in the programme. Jen Casson lives locally and is very active in the Methodist Church, where she's training to be a local preacher, someone who leads services and other times of prayer. She's also got a passion to see the church out and about and active in the community. And that's what we're going to find out about now, as I welcome Jen Casson to tell us how she wants to be at your service.
Good morning, Judy. Thank you for having me on this morning. I do work for the Methodist Church, and I work for the Methodist Church under the God for All umbrella. And the God for All umbrella is looking at ways that we as a Methodist Church can make our church premises more welcome to everybody. We are moving into a new line of pioneer ministry where we are hoping to enable people who may be experiencing food poverty or feel like they're living on the margins and enabling them to access church.
Now, we don't like to think that there is anybody who is in food poverty, that there are people who are on the fringes. We don't want to face that, do we?
That is a lot of the sort of attitudes and opinions that I can face in this line of work. Oh, that's not happening on the Isle of Man. Unfortunately, it is. And with the rises in the cost of living, there are more people needing to access food banks, and there are more and more people feeling that pressure and not being able to feed their families and making choices sometimes between, do we put the heating on or do we have a meal this evening? And that's not right.
The awful thing is that you can be in employment and earning money, but just not earning enough to meet the spiralling costs, especially if you have some children and if you're on a minimum wage job or perhaps a job with only a limited number of hours that are available for you to work. It's a very fine line to make the whole thing balance up, isn't it?
And it's those borderline folks who really never thought that they would be, because like you say, they're working folks, but because the rises in cost of living affect everything, there's been on cost to food, on cost to gas, on cost to electricity. And because they're just above those benefit margins, where does the money come from, Judith, for them to make up this extra money that they need to pay out each month? And that's where they're having to make some difficult choices, some of these families. And that's really not acceptable.
And if we want to be God's eyes and ears and hands and feet, if we say that in church, we've got to be it out in the community, haven't we? So what are we going to do, Jen?
What we're hoping to do in September is we're hoping to launch what we're entitling Fulfill Communities. Now, Fulfill is an acronym. The F stands for faith, so we're hoping to create a safe space to explore faith. The U stands for United, so we're hoping to grow relationships and empower and equip those who attend to have an active role within their communities. The L stands for a listening ear, so there'll be one-to-one support available through the volunteers, but also linking in with other services and providers that might be of benefit to the folks who are attending, like the gas board, electricity, things like that. The F is for food, because it's going to be a weekly drop-in session where there'll be a hot bath and tea and coffee available, all free of charge. The I is for inclusive, because we will be offering an unconditional welcome to everybody that comes through our door. And the L is for love in action, and that comes to what was in your question, which is that as Christians and as Methodists, we want to show God's unconditional love to everybody.
People are sometimes not very good at coming forward and asking for help because they don't like to say, I'm struggling. So how are you going to get the people that you want to be part of this? How are you going to reach them?
We've been very lucky to have very good, close working relations with Food Bank, who kindly put little invitations into their food parcels, because obviously with GDPR, it's very important to respect people's privacy. But just by popping that in with the food parcel, it just makes folks aware that this is available to them. But also, I met you, didn't I, at a course recently, talking to yourself and having it put out there that this is what we are hoping to do just might reach some of those folks who, they sort of introvert on themselves.
If you're in a tight spot, church is not the first place you're going to choose to go to, is it? So you want that barrier to come right down, don't you?
Exactly. And often when people are experiencing difficult times through food poverty, they feel isolated. It can lead to problems with their mental health. Like I mentioned earlier, it can lead to them sort of closing themselves off and sort of withdrawing from the world. And so what we want to say is, if there's any way that we can help, we've got a group in Port Erin called Butties and Banter, which is what we have modelled the Fulfil communities on. What we found there was that by inviting in people maybe from MCALs, if people are having problems, getting medical appointments, just connecting them in with somebody who can actually offer some assistance can be helpful. And so each of the communities is going to be very unique, and it's going to be led by those who attend.
Now, Jen, you look to me like somebody with boundless energy, but I guess you could probably do with a helper or two.
Exactly right, Judith. We've recently appointed a Fulfil assistant, which has been absolutely amazing. So I have this other lady who's joined me on the team, and that's going to be really important rolling forward, because the idea with these communities is that we want to launch them in all different areas on the island, so north, south, east, west. But obviously, myself and the assistant could do with some extra help. And so if there's anybody out there who has a heart for serving people, looking out for people, has a good listening ear, then I'd love for them to get in touch, because we would love their help and assistance as we grow this pioneer ministry across the island. We've been really lucky to receive some connectional funds to help support this ministry. So we're 50-50 matching it, which enables us to be able to offer this without a cost, which is important. So, yeah, we've been very lucky.
So this is launching beginning of September. Do you have a start date for it, Jen?
We do. We're hoping to launch the first Fulfil community in the Castletown area. So it's going to be within Castletown Methodist Church Hall, which is off Arbury Street. And we're launching on Thursday, the 5th of September. And it will be starting at 11:30 and we'll be going through till 1. There'll be a hot sausage bap, a cup of tea or coffee. But most importantly, there'll be an open door, a listening ear, and a warm welcome.
And I would say that even if you don't need what Fulfil offers, pop in, have a chat, because you might be glad of having that information to pass on to somebody else. Anybody pop in, find out what's going on, because if you don't need it yourself, you may be able to refer a friend and encourage them to go along. Jen, final question. Why do you do what you do? Have you always had a heart for God throughout your life?
I have been brought up Methodist, Judith. You're probably not surprised to hear that. My grandfather was a Methodist minister. My mum is a local preacher. So I have always been a part of a Methodist church. And I have learnt so much faith and resilience from my grandfather. I mean, he is now with the Lord, but he was still preaching until his final breaths, really, in his little nursing home, in those final days. He was still preaching to those around him. And that has very much been an inspiration to me, because as you mentioned at the start of the show, I am on a local preaching journey myself. I'm a trainee, and God has very much put an affirmation in my heart that God is for everybody. The good news is for everybody. It doesn't matter what your background is, where you come from. God loves you. And that's been very pronounced in my preaching training as well, because I do try my best to ensure that every service that I'm involved with is accessible to everybody at some point within it, because I think that's so important. We don't know when we go in the pulpit who might come through the door. And so it's so important that we channel God, that everybody in the congregation is enabled and allowed to connect in with him at some point within the service.
May you be happy.
Thank you, Jen Casson. And if you'd like to contact Jen to find out more about her first Fulfil community based in the Methodist Church in Castletown, Her email address is jen.casson@methodist.org.im, and Jen spells her name JenCasson, jen.casson@methodist.org.im. Or just pop along to the first Fulfil morning at 11:30 on the 5th of September in Castletown Methodist Church, and I'll give you a reminder about that on our notice board nearer the time. My next guest is a recent visitor to the island. He's Rev'd Andrew de Smet. He's an Anglican priest, and he's just retired as pastoral care advisor in the Diocese of York. What that work involved is something we'll find out shortly. But first, Andrew looks and sounds very English, but the de Smet surname might suggest otherwise.
It's Belgian. My grandfather, who I never met because he was gassed in the First World War and then survived that but died of cancer in the 1930s when my dad was 5, he was a de Smet. But he came over and married an English woman during the First World War. So that's where it comes from. So unfortunately it means I've got no Belgian connections because he died so far back. But actually in Belgium it's simply Smith. Of Smith, literally. So
really?
It's rather less interesting than it sounds.
You are a priest in the Anglican Church, but it wasn't your first career choice, was it?
No. I did a degree in biology and botany in Exeter, and then I found work in hospital microbiology. So I worked in microbiology for 5 years and then felt called to priesthood. Well, I kind of felt a bit of that at university, but thought I'd put it on hold and see whether it stuck. And then 5 years later, I came back to it, and here I am.
I love to ask people, particularly those who are in ordained ministry, how did that work out? Because if God has called you, the call won't go away, will it?
No, indeed. It kind of stays with you to greater or less. And also, I kind of felt drawn to working with people more directly. I became a Samaritan's volunteer, for example, and got involved in more sort of people work. And that was really where I felt the pull was, and also the excitement. So I eventually went through the process in the Anglican Church and got accepted. I also found it quite hard to articulate, which at that stage was still in some ways, it was a kind of felt sense that I feel drawn to this, but actually quite hard to put into words or quite why that is and what I got to offer, all those things. So it did feel quite a hard process in many ways. And then they send you off to a selection conference where you're sort of grilled for a couple of days. So I was quite surprised really when I sort of got through it all.
It's a very challenging job. Yes, it's a calling, but it's a very challenging one. And I think there's a dreadful misconception that somehow ordination is like putting a suit of armour on a person and saying, right, you've been called by God, you're ordained, you can cope with everything in life, you're indestructible, you can meet all our needs of all your parishioners. And it isn't like that at all, is it?
No. I mean, you have your particular strengths and things you're good at, and then the sort of areas where you struggle a bit. And also, like anyone else, you need affirmation, and we have our, your vulnerable points where things can get to you, and your ups and downs in life. Times when you're feeling good and happy and fulfilled, and other times when you're feeling a bit flat or overwhelmed or struggling. And it's both a joy and a difficulty of ordained or parish life is that there's always something you could be doing. In a parish, there's always someone who could do with a visit, or something that needs preparing ahead, or something comes out of nowhere, someone comes to your door, or you get a phone call or whatever. And alongside that, if you've got a family, it's finding time for family. And so it's actually quite a challenge to actually get that balance right.
And on top of that, we're now in a situation where quite often one member of the clergy has maybe 4 or 5 or even 6 individual churches in his or her parish. And so the stretch is even bigger. And we're not always terribly good at taking care of clergy mental health, are we?
No, indeed. I mean, I got first-hand experience of that because my last parish post was 5 churches, 4 parishes, half-time, and then my diocesan job in York Diocese, half-time. So these churches, I mean, the total population was 2,000, so it was quite sparsely populated bit of North Yorkshire. But that, and then the other demands, the risk is feeling you're never doing the job properly. And I think also these days where there's less clergy and they've got more higher workload and more parishes, there can be more of a sense of isolation. And also the church is going through a difficult patch in many ways at the moment. Numbers have gone down, and also finances are tricky for most churches at the moment. So you've got those pressures. So you can feel quite pressurised from different angles. And also, in terms of your sense of vocation, with a lot to do, it's also making sure you find time to have your time with God, your time to keep a sense of being grounded, your time to pray and all those things. If you like, you're filling up the bottle as well as emptying it all the time. And I was aware myself, for example, that if I neglected prayer or I was overworking or not reading, actually I suddenly found it much harder to prepare sermons and start to feel a bit ratty. And most of us, I think, have got their warning lights, if you like, that warn you when you're starting to go out of balance. And so part of it's attending to those and actually making an effort to push the balance back so you're leading a life that is sustainable and also has a sense of God in it.
Now, you're talking here from real felt experience, but also you are a psychotherapist. And so helping people with their mental health is something that's very important to you, isn't it?
Yes. I've just retired very recently. My role in the Diocese of York, where I lived, was pastoral care advisor. So that was kind of counselling, psychotherapy, pastoral support for clergy and other church workers and volunteers, and also on occasions doing mediations where there were disputes, and also training, getting people to think about their balance of their life and things when they're at a point of transition, like becoming a curate or finishing as a curate and going on to be a vicar of a parish or coming up for retirement, those kinds of things. Preventative work of getting people to reflect and look at their own self-care and how they sustain their sense of calling. And then there's the therapy side where you're alongside people who are struggling, providing a safe, confidential space where people can talk, and then that process of healing and reflection and finding new ways of doing things. And also clergy, like anyone else, have all the sort of usual problems that people have in their lives. There can be past trauma, there can be relationship problems, there can be obviously stress and, all the things that people in all walks of life experience, clergy aren't immune from.
The one thing that I think we could say universally is that we are getting better at saying to people that, it sounds like a cliche, but it isn't, that it's okay to not be okay. And that's been a big breakthrough, hasn't it?
Yes, indeed. And it's still hard, I think, for many people. So it's important to have confidential places where you can go and just say, this is terrible, I'm really struggling, or whatever it might be. And it's not going to go any further unless you want it to.
And it's not necessarily a sign that you're going to give up. It's just a sign that you want to confidentially say what is really weighing on you. And also, it's about feeling appreciated and loved and valued, isn't it?
Yes, that's very important, I think. And I mean, they say of relationships, marriage or whatever, that actually there needs to be 5 times as much affirmation as criticism for it to work. And I think it's actually the same in lots of other areas, like church or organisations of any sort, that if there's a good culture of affirmation, then actually people can cope with a bit of criticism. Whereas if nobody says anything till you get something wrong and then everyone goes down on you like a ton of bricks, that's quite hard to bear.
It's going to be my watchword. We need, whatever we're involved in, whether it's family life or whether we are involved in church life or whether it's our job, 5 times more affirmation than criticism. If we could all do that, wouldn't that be transformational?
That would be wonderful, yeah. Because actually as human beings, like in a sense any other animals, we're programmed to look for threat and for things that are wrong because they threaten survival. So mentally we're prone to discount the positives or just not notice them. So actually in terms of giving and receiving them, because at a deeper level we do notice, that's why we need to really attend to giving affirmation and the positives, because people will notice the criticism much more.
May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be ever at your back.
May the sun shine warm upon your face,
and the rain fall soft upon your feet.
and until we meet again.
God hold you, may God hold you, ever in the palm of His hand.
May the road rise to meet you, may the wind ever at your back.
May the sun shine warm upon your and the rain falls soft upon your fields.
And until we meet again,
may God hold you, may God hold you, ever in the palm of His hand, ever in the palm of His hand. The palm of His hand.
An Irish blessing from Aled Jones singing with the priests, who've recently announced their retirement after 30 years of recording and giving concerts, but not, of course, retiring from being Roman Catholic priests. Now let's take a look at our notice board, and we begin with events later today. This afternoon in Selby Methodist Church, Zoe Cannell will be comparing a concert by Gareth Moore, Sarah Qualtrough and Terry Qualtrough. It starts at 3 o'clock, admission at the door is £10 and it'll be followed by coffee and tea and homemade cakes. And it's a busy afternoon for Gareth because it's Bride Parish Church anniversary service this evening at 6:30. Reverend Joe Dudley will be officiating and the guest organist will be Gareth Moore. Moving on to the week ahead now, and the beach missions in Peel and Port St Mary are starting their second week. You can always tell when the beach mission are meeting in Peel because you'll see the flags down there on the beach. Go along and you will be made very welcome. Port St Mary Beach Mission is, as usual, based at Malmore on the promenade in Port St Mary and has another week of activities from 0 to 17-year-olds. Activities take place daily, Monday to Friday, in 6 age groups, and all are welcome. There's a website. Go to PSMBM, the first letter of each of the words Port St Mary Beach Mission, psmbm.im, and everything you need to know is there. Tomorrow, Monday the 5th, is Super Monday in the lounge at Colby Methodist Church. Pop in between noon and 1:30 to enjoy homemade soup with fresh bread, followed by tea or coffee. There's no charge, but a little donation to help with costs is always welcome. This Wednesday, the weekly concert in St Thomas's Church here in Douglas will be given by Simon Fletcher, Jenny Derbyshire and Gareth Moore. Starting at the usual time of 7:45, it's free admission with refreshments afterwards. And St Thomas's Church is just off Douglas Promenade, close to the Gaiety Theatre and Villa Marina complex. And on Thursday evening, Londu Male Voice Choir will be in concert in the Erin Arts Centre in Port Erin. Starting at 7:30, admission is free with a retiring collection and there'll be refreshments served after the concert. Looking ahead to next weekend, and next Saturday and Sunday will be 2 days of celebration in Port Erin to mark the opening of the new Methodist Chapel and enhanced community facilities. It's in the same place as the old church on Station Road in Port Erin, and you're welcome to pop in next Saturday to see the new chapel and the different size rooms now available for hire, as well as enjoy a small flower festival and look at displays of memorabilia from the church over the years. That's next Saturday between 10 and 4:30. And of course, there'll be refreshments available too. Then next Sunday at 10:30, the opening celebration service will be led by Reverend David Shirtliff. Everyone is welcome to share in this service of praise and thanksgiving. And I'm afraid that's all that we've time for now, but I'll be back later in our virtual lounge tonight from 9 o'clock onwards. Virtual comfortable chairs, drinks and snacks. Virtually everything you can imagine to round off your day. But the easy listening music and your requests and dedications are very real. And I'd love you to join me if you can. So till whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a blessed and peaceful week and a very good morning.
Man's Radio.